I wanted to raise with you, Minister, the issue of Athena Swan, and as you know, and I thank you or the Department for the briefing note on it. There is concern among quite a few academics in this country that Athena Swan, which, as you know, started out with high ideals as a body to progress equality, the equality of the sexes, gender equality in higher education and research, has become a kind of an ideological monster that could threaten people's academic freedom. And with respect, Caerlic, I have a couple of specific questions I want to ask the Minister on this, but it is important just to set out the background here. This was a pre-Brexit import from the UK, the Athena Swan Charter. In its UK form, it has changed. For one thing, access to funding for higher education research in the UK is not dependent strictly on compliance with Athena Swan principles. There are other possibilities. That's not the case in Ireland. The Higher Education Authority has explicitly stated that HEI stand to lose access to research funding if they do not achieve Athena Swan awards within a set time frame. The problem with that is that aspects of the Athena Swan Charter agenda have become quite ideological and involve certainly some very contestable ideas in a way that could frustrate and indeed victimise academics in the exercise of their academic freedom. So I'm talking about, just to give you an example, there's a commitment required to foster collective understanding that intersectional inequalities must be accounted for, and a commitment to fostering collective understanding that individuals have the right to determine their gender. Now, that is not a scientifically based proposition, because you can't determine your gender. Your gender is a given. You may have issues with your gender identity. You may deserve everybody's sympathy, but academics must be free to critique this and regard it as nonsense if they wish, and make their case without feeling threatened in their academic freedom. And even if you were to disagree with me on that, one might say that the demand to sign up to social justice commitments of any kind and the coercion to become activists for social justice goals determined by an external body, that's as much a problem as the potential actual content of those principles, because you have higher education bodies and universities enforced by the Irish government to push norms and standards set by international NGOs, in effect, and in the case I've just given, not even evidence-based, not required by law, and as I said, potentially destructive of academic freedom. As I said, the problem is you have to be on board with the Athena Swan Charter in Ireland if you're going to get academic, if you're going to get funding. That means it's a gateway, that means it's a control. So if it's advancing politically contested principles, that's a problem for academic freedom. So the kind of questions I'd be grateful for an answer to, Minister, having regard to the briefing you sent, is how much HEA funding, and interrupt me if you want to just give me answers, or you can give them sequentially or whatever you want, but how much HEA funding was used to support this work funding Athena Swan Charter in the last financial year? And can the Department supply details on the cost to the public exchequer of this work?
Just on that, if
yes.
that can be helpful, I don't have it. I send it to you, and the answer is a HEA matter, but we'll get the answer.
Thank you so much. Now, the Charter requires acceptance of principles which impinge on freedom of conscience and religion, for example. And one test of academic freedom would be that should an individual refuse to comply with the compulsions entailed in the Athena Swan Ireland Charter, that person would not suffer disadvantage. Are individual academics free to reject the Charter in their writings and in their academic actions in the light of their academic views on the Charter?
Well, just before the vote, dear Deputy, one of the things I wrote down was you didn't want the academic freedoms to be threatened, and I would entirely agree with that. Neither would I want to have any individual, for whatever reason, yes, a member of an academic staff or a student in any university or any HEI to feel threatened by who they are. Yes. And I think that's what the whole concept of this, my understanding is, given the fact that this isn't just used in Ireland and the United Kingdom, it's also used in the United States, in Canada, in India and in other countries as well. And there's an acceptance, I think, around the world now that there are basic norms that in response to getting public monies into education, that what you said is absolutely correct. The threats, for whatever reason, should not be present. And for whatever a person wants to study, how they present themselves or how they identify, they shouldn't feel threatened by that. And the Charter as well, you know, talks about a flexible framework. It's designed to ensure diversity, different individuals, ideas and perspectives are valued, which goes to the kernel of autonomy within education. The government doesn't in any way impinge on that. It also complements fundamental commitments to academic freedom. It helps to promote the voices of all. It recognises that each institution, department and professional unit has different equality challenges. And it does something very important for my previous occupation. One of its goals is the underrepresentation of men in particular disciplines, which is something that I would think is really valued, considering the shortage, for instance, of the number of men in primary education. But on top of all of that, you know, while that is the framework and that is the basis on which they operate, national legislation is also there to make sure that people are protected and that academic freedoms are protected. And going back to what I said a while ago, the HEA Act is fundamental in that. So you're right, I agree with you. Threats have no place in a university, either threats to people's academic integrity, to their belief systems, or to who and what they present themselves as.
Yeah, the problem though with what you're saying is that while it's fine in general terms, and I agree with you, there's plenty that's good that Athena Swan set out to promote and defend. The problem is how these things get manipulated over time. We're living in a cancel culture kind of environment where you see people who have views that differ from somebody else's views accused of making that other person feeling unsafe. Now that isn't a good academic environment, and yet that is increasingly the problem across the Western world. So it's not enough to say nobody wants to threaten anybody, but if the very expression of certain academic ideas is deemed by another person to be a threat, that can't be the basis to close down their academic freedom. And it's not clear to me that Athena Swan, as currently, and bear in mind, as I said, it is the gateway to funding. That has changed. That is not the case in Britain. There are other ways of peeling the onion, so to speak.
Just in relation to that, Senator, I'm sure that if you had an academic, for instance, perpetrating anti-Semitic or anti-Catholic, yes, or anti-Islamic or Islamophobia within the confines of a higher education institute, that you'd want a charter, you'd want a set of rules, and you'd want a set of principles to make sure that that person is not allowed to promulgate that sort of hate.
Yes, I agree with you. Freedom of expression is not absolute, but actually academic freedom does and must allow the development of ideas that are considered or may be considered by certain people to be offensive. And if you close that down, you're no longer in a democracy, much less a university.
I agree with you. Yeah. And I'm sure that in 1930s Germany, there were people who proffered that ideology when it came to making sure that certain curricula within German universities or German schools, when it came to the Jewish people, were of a certain type. That became the norm.
That argument is what's called reductio ad absurdum, and that will not reassure academics who have perfectly, and I just gave you the example of an objective of Athena Swan, which is not scientifically backed or demonstrable, the idea that a person may determine their gender. But I put you the question again then, if an individual academic has publicly rejected the Athena Swan Charter on grounds that they believe that it inhibits academic freedom or requires compliance with certain political ideas that they contest. And unlike the Nazi Germany example, that they legitimately contest, having regard to logic and evidence, right? Given that that person might want to supervise PhD candidates where applications for public funding are involved, can that academic feel reassured that their rejection of the overly politicized dimension of Athena Swan, as they believe it and as they can no doubt demonstrate it, can they feel reassured that they won't be victimized in the performance of their academic freedom?
Well, the HEIs as independent entities have HR and IR mechanisms and scaffolding to protect individuals and to investigate as well, where appropriate, if people bring allegations or any sort of complaint against an academic or non-academic member of staff. But I'm just wondering, is it on the basis of gender equality plans that you have the greatest level of difficulty with this, or is it a wider issue?
This is an academic freedom issue. Undoubtedly, the gender critical debate if you like, illustrates the problem, because what you see here, as we have seen in the government's controversial legislation around hate speech, contains definitions that are at best politically contested and at worst scientifically illiterate. So that is an example.
What exactly would be scientifically illiterate?
Well, it's scientifically illiterate to say that a person can determine their gender. Now, if Athena Swan...
So is that the fundamental issue?
Can I remind?
I'm giving you an example of something that is not demonstrable in fact, that is nonetheless used as a kind of a political, part of the political agenda of Athena Swan. I've pointed out to you that in Britain there can be other ways of compliance. Athena Swan shouldn't be the only gateway. I've pointed out to you as well that in Britain...
But you accept there has to be a gateway?
Yes, and perhaps a plurality of them.
Would you accept that the United States, Canada, India, other first world developed countries are wrong?
I'm not going to get in. We're not in 2 minutes. No way am I going to get into a study.
Tell you what we'll do. We'll let the Senator have 2 minutes, and then I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reply. Okay, and that will close the debate then.
You see, Minister, the point is I have demonstrated to you also that in Britain they reformed their Athena Swan charter. I've asked you questions that you haven't given me specific guarantees on.
And I won't.
For example, whether an individual's public rejection of AS Ireland charter, even just that, would make him or her ineligible for promotion within a department of school which has adopted the charter, or if they have gender critical views around people's sense of self. Can you give staff at third level colleges a guarantee that expressions of academic freedom will not negatively impact on employment, promotion or research eligibility? And please don't compare this with Nazi Germany. You are talking about academics who are concerned not to be bullied into using language in some cases that they regard as untruthful. Okay? You have highly contested stuff here. You've withdrawn your own hate speech bill because a great number of people in our society are scratching their heads at the political insiderism that has led to such contested definitions of, for example, gender as is contained in that legislation. So, like, this isn't some kind of a fringe issue. There is serious concern among credible academics.
You've 25 seconds left, Senator.
I didn't say it was a fringe issue, and I think to characterise it as that is a misrepresentation. If you want to read back the blacks of the debate, I never characterised it as that. But I think, to be fair, you haven't either enunciated what are the positives with regard to the charter or the goals associated with the charter.
It's not my job to do that here.
No, but I mean, you have zoned in on a particular element of it, and you've asked me for sets of guarantees, given that I am not the employer of any academic in Ireland.
That's fair enough.
Any academic in Ireland has right to recourse to his or her employer if they feel. And bullying is a very serious issue, and you mentioned the word bullied. If any academic or non-academic member of staff or student in a university or a HEI that is governed under the auspices of the HEA Act is bullied or is in any way impeded from progression, they have a recourse through the HR and IR mechanisms, and they know that.
Yeah, but they mightn't get their funding for their research projects.
They also know that the Minister of the day does not have direct line responsibility for this, and they also know that the HEIs collaborating with the HEA have worked with this over a long period of time, and I think there was a review in the early 2000s on this. So look, to be honest about it, the fundamental question that you asked me is, can I give guarantees with regard to career progression or anything to do with human resources? That is not the role of the Minister.
Well, it is frightening.
Okay.
If there is one half question. You said a minute ago, half an hour or an hour ago, and it was an interesting answer where you said, just to confirm, I'm not open to a reform of the Leaving Cert. I think on the light of the...
Sorry, hold on a second. I did not say
No,
that.
sorry, you're not over to the CAO. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying...
You're doing a good job of it now.
Well, I didn't mean to.
Yeah,
what you said was it's not on your agenda to reopen the debate about the point
If you're going to quote me, at least quote me accurately.
Well, now, come on, we're all going on the hoof here. Give me some credit.
You're definitely on the hoof here.
I'm not trying...
I think, Chairman, I've answered the question.
You're trying to get away.
Chairman, I have no more to add on an issue I have no responsibility for.
It was an interesting half question, and it wasn't meant to put the Minister in any kind of disadvantage.
I know what
I just said, you had said earlier that you weren't open to looking again at the point system and that way of access because you said it's the best, CAO is the best show in town until you see another one. Okay. I would like a more reassuring answer as to whether you would be open to further discussion and examination of Athena Swan Charter Ireland and how it's operating in the light that many decent academics are worried that it could curtail their academic freedom.
And Senator, as a representative of the National University of Ireland in Shanadairn, you know,
hoping for your vote,
you know as well as I do, that the higher education institutes, together with the Higher Education Authority, is the correct forum in which this can be discussed further, because I don't have any human resource or industrial relations remit, and that is a matter for the governing authorities of each individual HEI working with the HEA.
Okay, thank you very much.